Welcome back now for the news in detail. Now, in a diplomatic setback for India, US lawmakers have called on New Delhi to end the humanitarian crisis in occupied Kashmir, which has been under curfew for the last 2 months. In a report, the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations asked India to end its communications blackout and lift the curfew in the valley. The lawmakers have asked India to end its curfew, lift the communications blackout and release all arrested from the valley. It's the first time that the US Congress has approached legislative action against India. The Senate committee report was introduced by Senator Chris Van Hollen. In an interview, Hollen said the US is closely monitoring the situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Hollen said the Indian government recently denied him permission to visit the valley to assess the on-ground situation. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has once again expressed concerns over the grave situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir. In a briefing, the United Nations chief spokesman Stéphane Dujarric said Guterres has asked Pakistan and India to resolve the Kashmir crisis through dialogue. Dujarric said the Secretary-General's position on Kashmir has not changed. He said Guterres has underscored the need for addressing human rights abuses in the occupied valley. Dujarric said the United Nations Secretary General believes human rights must be at the forefront of a resolution of the Kashmir crisis. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has called on Azad Kashmir citizens to exercise restraint and not to cross the line of control to help their besieged brethren. Khan said anyone crossing the line of control to provide humanitarian aid to Kashmiris would play into the hands of India's skewed narrative. Pakistan has rejected comments made by the Indian Foreign Ministry spokesperson about Prime Minister Imran Khan. In a statement, Pakistan's Foreign Office told India to keep its lectures on diplomacy and normalcy to itself. It said Pakistan will continue to expose India's state terrorism in occupied Kashmir. The Foreign Office said India has kept 8 million Kashmiris caged for over 2 months, and it's deceiving the world by claiming that the situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir is normal. India's communications blackout in occupied Kashmir has taken a severe toll on the local information technology sector. Silicon Valley in Rang-Reth Industrial Estate near Srinagar has been at a total standstill since 5th of August. Locals said the internet shutdown is a devastating blow to the valley's software business. Over 800,000 mobile connections and internet services remain suspended in the valley. The auto sector has also been hit, and a single vehicle has not been sold in the occupied valley since 5th of August. Now, India's curfew and communications blackout has entered its 62nd consecutive day. In India, the police have begun criminal proceedings against 50 celebrities for protesting against the lynching of minorities. The celebrities raised their voices against mob justice in a letter to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The note was signed by prominent personalities including Bollywood filmmakers Anurag Kashyap and Mani Ratnam and actress Konkana Sen. Their letter to Prime Minister Modi demanded an immediate end to the lynching of Muslims, Dalits and other minorities. They say there can be no democracy in India without dissent. The police say a so-called first investigation report has been registered against the celebrities in eastern Bihar state on the orders of a local court. They say a lawyer had petitioned the court to seek criminal proceedings against the 50 stars, accusing them of tarnishing India's image. Now moving to Iraq, where clashes between protesters and police have killed 5 people in Baghdad. Protests over unemployment and corruption have rocked the capital and other Iraqi cities since Tuesday. Hospital officials say the death toll from the violence has risen to 77. The government has lifted the curfew in Baghdad on Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi's orders. Iraqi lawmakers have demanded the government's resignation after the clampdown on protesters. In a statement, powerful cleric Muqtada al-Sadr called upon the government to hold snap elections. Moving on, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis has urged the US to use its influence to diffuse tensions in the eastern Mediterranean. NATO allies Turkey and Greece are at loggerheads over the island, which has been ethnically split between Greek and Turkish Cypriots since 1974. In a meeting with US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the Greek Prime Minister said recent Turkish moves off the south coast of Cyprus violated the island's sovereignty. Ankara sent a drilling ship to an area already licensed to Italian and French companies, intensifying tensions between Turkey and Cyprus. Ankara says some of the areas where Cyprus is exploring are on its own continental shelf. Pompeo said Greece can play an important strategic role in the region and be a pillar for stability.
I think Greece can play an important strategic role here in the region. This is a dynamic region. There's lots going on. There's lots of change taking place. And we are very confident that together we can work to ensure that Greece can be a pillar for stability in this region.
Meanwhile, 17 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party have been killed in Turkish airstrikes during a counter-terrorist operation in northern Iraq. In a statement, Turkey's defense ministry said military operations backed by air power were carried out in the Zap, Gara and Avasin regions of the country. The ministry said Turkey will continue to destroy weapons emplacements and shelters used by the terrorists. Over 400 Kurdish militants have been killed in northern Iraq over the past 4 months. Turkey holds the PKK responsible for the death of some 40,000 people in a 30-year terrorist campaign. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said Turkey will carry out an air and ground military operation east of the Euphrates River in Syria. This is his most direct indication of an incursion since Ankara and Washington decided to establish a safe zone. Speaking at the opening of his AK party's annual camp, Erdogan said the operation can start as soon as today or tomorrow. The president said, besides multiple warnings to negotiators, Turkey has acted with sufficient patience. Meanwhile, the US-backed SDF force says it will defend itself against any unprovoked attack by the military. Meanwhile, a Syrian rebel group has pledged to back a Turkish operation against Kurdish fighters in northeast Syria. Now moving to Nigeria, where militants have killed 16 people, including 11 soldiers, in an attack in the northeastern state of Borno. A security official says 6 others were wounded in the attack. It said 2 soldiers are missing. Militants stormed a refugee camp near Cameroon's border, killing 2 people. Meanwhile, in Libya, a drone strike at Misrata airport has injured a civilian. City authorities say 2 planes on the tarmac were damaged in the attack. Flights have been suspended at the airport. Government forces have blamed rebel commander Khalifa Haftar's forces for the assault. The United Nations says 500 people have been killed since Haftar's forces launched an offensive to capture Tripoli on 4th April. The United States and North Korea have resumed their nuclear talks despite Pyongyang's test of a ballistic missile earlier this week. North Korea's Kim Jong-gil and U.S. top negotiator Stephen Biegun are part of the teams holding the talks in Swedish capital Stockholm. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he is hopeful of progress in the nuclear talks between the 2 countries. The 2 sides are meeting for the first time since U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met in June. Moving on, the European Union has rejected Britain's request to hold Brexit talks this weekend. The European Commission said Prime Minister Boris Johnson's new proposals do not provide any basis for finalising a separation agreement. Earlier, Johnson had reiterated his commitment to leave the bloc on 31st of October with or without a deal. The government has acknowledged Johnson will seek a further Brexit delay from the EU if no deal has been reached by 19th of October. Johnson's top advisor Dominic Cummings says the government will not change its negotiating position. Now, ahead of their visit to Pakistan, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have said they are looking forward to building a lasting friendship with the country. In a statement, the Kensington Palace released the details of Prime William and Kate Middleton's official tour. The palace official said the royal couple will visit Islamabad, Lahore and northern areas of the country. It said they will also interact with organizations which focus on empowering young people. The royal couple has requested to be provided with ample opportunities to interact with Pakistanis as much as possible. The statement said the Duke and Duchess are keen to learn about the climate change issues affecting Pakistan. The British royal couple will arrive in Pakistan for the 5-day visit on 14th of October. It's time for a short break. Stay tuned with Indus News. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accuses Congress members of harassing his department to obtain documents related to an impeachment probe. Talking to the media in Greece, Pompeo said lawmakers are directly contacting State Department employees. Pompeo said he will not let that happen to his team. A Congress committee is holding an inquiry against President Donald Trump for seeking foreign help against his political rival, Joe Biden. Earlier, Democrats accused Pompeo of obstructing the investigation. Meanwhile, Democratic lawmakers have subpoenaed documents from the White House as part of their impeachment inquiry. In the United States, President Donald Trump's administration has passed a new decree against legal migrants. The White House has issued a proclamation banning immigrants from obtaining U.S. visas if they cannot afford to pay for their own medical care. The order says immigrants must now show they can obtain health insurance within 30 days of their arrival. The administration says people seeking asylum and refuge will not be affected by the new law. The measure comes into force from November 3rd. Still in the United States, aides to Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders say he suffered a heart attack earlier this week. Campaign advisor Jeff Wavin says the veteran senator underwent emergency surgery after complaining of a chest pain at a campaign event in Nevada. Wavin says surgeons operated on the 78-year-old Sanders to remove a blockage in one of his arteries. In a statement issued after he was discharged from hospital, Sanders said he is now feeling great and looks forward to getting back to work. Sanders has centered his presidential campaign on a promise to provide free medical care to all Americans. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, has called for a probe into violence during protests in Hong Kong. Over 1,000 people have been wounded in the protests that started in June against an extradition bill. Thousands of citizens have protested against a ban on face masks. Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam has condemned the violent protests against the anti-mask law. Lam said extreme violence by protesters has justified her decision to invoke emergency powers.
There were terrible, violent incidents happened in all districts in Hong Kong last night. The extreme actions by mask rioters were shocking. This shows that public security in Hong Kong has been extensively jeopardized, which is a solid justification for the SAR government to invoke an emergency law to ban the face mask yesterday.
U.S. tech giant Microsoft has accused Iranian hackers of targeting the U.S. presidential campaign. The company's vice president Tom Burt says a hacking group linked to Iran has carried out cyber attacks on U.S. journalists and government officials. Burt said only 4 accounts were compromised by the group's significant cyber activity. The group, which Microsoft calls Phosphorus, used information gathered by researching their targets. but says the group used that information to gain password reset features and attempt to take over targeted accounts. Microsoft has informed the account owners, advising them to ramp up their online defenses. Meanwhile, Portuguese voters will cast their ballots tomorrow, with opinion polls pointing to the re-election of the ruling Socialist Party. Most analysts believe Prime Minister Antonio Costa's party will win most seats, but it is unclear if will win an absolute majority in the parliament. The Socialists currently lead the ruling Geringonça coalition with support from two far-left Eurosceptic parties. Costa hopes to secure a majority so he can govern without his Geringonça allies. His administration is popular because unemployment has fallen to just 6% since the last elections. But supporters of the opposition Social Democratic Party certainly have not given up. They rallied on the streets of Lisbon on the last day of election campaign.
I hope Dr. Rio wins the election in Portugal, because I think he is the ideal man to be Prime Minister. Not only because he is serious, but also the proposals he presents, in my view, are the best proposals for a country developing in the first world and a European country.
The Mexican volcano Popocatepetl has erupted, blowing a dramatic ash column into the sky. The volcano has blown lava and rocks up to 2,000 meters into the air. Popocatepetl is over 5,000 meters high, making it the second highest mountain in Mexico. The volcano is the fifth highest in North America. In northern Italy, unseasonal weather caused by climate change is wreaking havoc amongst bees, which are one of the most important insect species on planet. The world's crucial pollinators, vital for farming and wild plants, are struggling for survival in the unusually early heat. More details in this report.
The beekeepers stand beside piles of beehives, worried and anxious. Not having honey is the least of their problems. This year, the bees could make only tiny quantities of honey, not even enough to keep alive, sparking fears for their future. Climate change is causing habitat loss for bees unable to migrate to cooler areas and establish new hives. The world's honeybees are in steep decline, with 10 million hives disappearing in only the last 3 years. Fighting back tears at the fate of his charges over the summer, Italian beekeeper Riccardo Polide said this year was the hardest harvest of his life.
We're not talking about low production or a lower production than normal. We are talking about pitiful quantities of honey that is not even enough to keep the bees alive.
Samuele Culata, a beekeeping technician, blames increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere for the reduction in nectar production.
Plants must defend themselves from extra carbon dioxide, and as a result, they reduce certain activities, including nectar production.
The Italian Apiarist Association has asked the government to declare a national disaster so beekeepers can benefit from aid. The association, however, is not optimistic about the future.
When the sight of plastic bags, bottles and other debris littering the seabed becomes too much, there is only one thing to do. Dive to the bottom of the seabed and clear the junk yourself. This solution has been adopted by Oceanium, which has removed hundreds of kilos of plastic rubbish from the West African state of Senegal. More in this report.
According to the United Nations, 8 million tons of plastic ends up in the world's oceans every year. In the Senegalese capital of Dakar, the fight against this plastic tide is well underway, thanks in part to a team of amateur divers operating under the name Oceanium.
It's very polluted. Unfortunately, some of the locals throw their rubbish straight into the water. It's sad.
Restricted by oxygen levels, the divers have just 1 hour per descent to gather as much rubbish as they can. Oceanium organised their first clean-up operation 2 years ago. Now, the plan is to make them more frequent.
We realized that the sea is too dirty. A lot of people have this view of the sea as a rubbish bin, so they just throw away all sorts of things. That's why we're here, to clean up.
In 2015, the country passed a law banning the sale of plastic bags. But 4 years on, this has still not come into force. And Gorée Island, a popular tourist destination off the coast of Dakar, is particularly affected by this pollution.
We're in summer, so we're seeing a lot of beer cans and plastic bottles and cups. People who go to the beach are drinking and partying, and if there are no bins, things get left on the beach. And then, with the swell, it ends up in the sea, and because it's a bay, it ends up here.
The team's most recent cleanup operation saw hundreds of kilos of waste removed from the ocean. It's certainly a start, but there's still a long way to go if Senegal is to attain President Macky Sall's goal of becoming a zero-waste nation.
Now let's have a look at the weather update. With the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For more news and updates, keep watching Indus News.